Hey, sociologist, what's up? This is our third, and hopefully final video about crime and the way sociologists think about crime, and we're going to cover kind of three issues on this video, but they all relate to the kind of imbalance we have in crime or how we understand why crime happens, especially to certain groups of people. We're going to talk about the issue of plea bargaining, going to talk about drug legalization, and going to talk about some theories of crime that are in your textbook also. So, this first part, we've been sort of asking you questions: who's in prison, who are criminals. Um, this third question is really sort of an important one, and it is: would you ever plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit? If you were accused of a crime and you were completely innocent, would you ever tell a judge, "I'm guilty"? Would you do that? And I think the impulse to do that is to say, "No, not guilty, Your Honor." But I'm going to tell you why some people might. Why some people might. So, first of all, we have a lot of very draconian laws in this country called mandatory minimum sentencing laws. Oregon passed these laws in 1993 here in our state. They were called Measure 11. And for certain offenses, if you're age 15 or older, first offense, third offense, doesn't matter. You're going to prison for a very long time. Doesn't matter who you are. And what your story is, you're going to prison. And so we had to spend a lot of money in the 1990s and the 2000s building prisons because these laws mandated the incarceration of a lot of offenders, mostly first-time offenders. And one of the reasons we are challenged in higher education is Oregon is a state that spends more money on prisons than it does on colleges and universities. So if you wonder why tuition goes up and fees go up and everything goes up, it's that we have to pay to warehouse a lot of people in this state. And so we have several felonies that will automatically send you to prison for a while. So that's just sort of the background. There are these mandatory drug laws and three strikes, you're in your outlaws in California. There are all these sort of laws that are out there. Okay, so let's do this by giving you a scenario. Let's say that someone, and we're going to give this someone a name to create this scenario. We're going to name him Paco. Because Paco is my name in my Spanish class in high school. Paco, that's my nombre de español. Let's say his name is Paco. And Paco has been accused of first-degree assault. So assault with a weapon, stabbing someone or, hitting them with a bat. Under Oregon law, a first-degree assault is 7 years and 6 months in prison. That's it. You don't get out for good behavior. That's it. You go to prison for 7.5 years. Here's the thing. Paco is accused of hitting someone with a club in downtown Portland and is looking at 7 years and 6 months if he is found guilty of that crime. Paco did not do it. Paco is innocent of this crime, but Paco has been arrested for this crime, and I'll tell you what Paco has going against him. Paco has several things going against him. One is he doesn't have a very good alibi. Where were you on the night of April 8th? Quick. I don't know. I mean, imagine I was here, but so Paco was when the police stopped him. They said he says at home watching Netflix. Was anybody home with you? Can anybody verify that you were watching Netflix? No, I was just at home watching TV. Number one, Paco's got no alibi. Number two, there is an eyewitness that put someone that looks like Paco at the scene. Eyewitness testimony is problematic. Often people think if you've got an eyewitness, it's an ironclad case. Somebody saw you at the scene. People are not trained to identify people. Often if there's a crime going on, especially somebody who's being beaten, people aren't thinking, oh, I need to look at this person so I can remember, so I can testify against them in court. And the person who is an eyewitness is a little old white lady. And all she told the police was, I saw a Hispanic man beating up another person with a club. And so the police pull out some usual suspects. They're called throw sheets. They're just mug shots. And she says, yeah, that guy. I think it's that guy. And what we know from research is that cross-race identification, including of people of color trying to identify white people, is horribly problematic, and people get the wrong person all the time. I mean, I did an experiment in my criminology class at Portland State with a local news station with KPTV, where we were talking about the problem of eyewitness identification. And we set up this thing, and so it was a big lecture hall full of students. And we had a film crew there, and often there's film crews filming on campus and filming me. And so I said, no, they're just doing some filming. Don't pay attention to the film crew in the back. And while I'm lecturing, some dude kind of creeped into the classroom, grabbed my book bag, and ran. And I'm like, oh my God, that dude just stole my book bag. And then, everybody's panicking, and some football player's like, oh, get him. And I'm like, no. We just need to solve the crime. We need to know, you just saw that crime happen 60 seconds ago. Give me the description. How tall was he? 5'8", 5'9", 6'1", 6'2", all up and down. What color hair did he have? He had red hair. No, he had brown hair. No, he had blonde hair. What was his build? I mean, it was all sort of all over the place, even though they had just witnessed this crime a few minutes earlier. And then what the news crew did is took the guy who was working for the news crew and changed his clothes and brought in 3 people, one of which was the guy that actually stole my bag, and the other was 2 sort of lookalikes, and said, all right, you guys are witnesses to this crime. It just happened. You're going to identify the person. You're eyewitness. You're the best eyewitness because this crime just happened. It wasn't like a year ago. It just happened minutes ago. You're going to identify, and you need to get it right, because the guy that you identify is going to be seen as being guilty and is going to be put to death. So get it right. And only a third of the class got the right person. When we had them all lined up, 2/3 picked the wrong person. So eyewitness testimony is horribly problematic. So problem number 2 is there's an eyewitness, a little old white lady, who puts Paco at the scene of the crime. Problem number 3 is Paco's got a record. When he was younger, he got into a little bit of trouble. He, got a little gang tattoo on his neck and had a kind of stole a car when he was 16, paid his dues, and led a clean life ever since. But he's got a record. He's got a record. And he looks like he's probably had a record because he's got some gang tattoos. Problem number 4 is Paco is English as a second language person, and the way lawyers talk is alienating to people that are native English speakers, and so a lot of it, he's missing out on a lot of the details. And number 5, and perhaps the most important, is that Paco cannot afford a lawyer. Lawyers are expensive. If you're accused of a crime, you need a $3,000 retainer up front, and then there's probably more to follow. I don't know how many of you have $3,000 laying around for a defense lawyer. But if you're O.J. Simpson, you can get the dream team, the Kardashians, if you want to know how that whole thing started. You can spend money on excellent lawyers. But fortunately, the Constitution has written into it a little clause that says if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be provided to you by the state. Thank you, framers of the Constitution and the creators of this country. Everybody should have a fair chance in trial. And so those attorneys are called public defenders. Public defenders, sometimes they are, high-power lawyers, but for the most part, they're people that work in the public defender's office that are low-paid attorneys that have a huge caseload of indigent clients who are too poor to be able to afford lawyers, and they have to be able to process these cases. And so the courts assign Paco a public defender, and that public defender cares about the outcome, thinks Paco deserves a fair trial, but it's got about 15 other cases just like Paco's. And they're all stacked up and they're all waiting to go. Okay, so this is the situation Paco is in. He's innocent, doesn't have an alibi. There's an eyewitness that puts him on the scene. He's got a criminal history, including a gang involvement. Doesn't speak English so well. Got a public defender. Now, the Constitution also says everyone has a right to a jury trial. That's good news, right? I mean, everybody is granted their day in court. But there are 1 million arrests a year, over 1 million arrests a year, for felony convictions, felony crimes. Every single one of those people is guaranteed a jury trial. What if everybody who had the right to a jury trial asked for a jury trial? Do you know what you need for a jury trial? That's right, a jury. And how many people are on a jury? That's right, 12 people. How do you get those 12 people? You bring in about 50 people to interview both sides. The prosecution and the defense has to interview both sides, find 12 people that they think would be impartial jurors. It's a process. On the Jeremy Christian trial that we just had in Portland, the guy that stabbed the men on the MAX train, they brought in 300 people to find 12 people. So if every one of those 1 million felony cases demanded a jury trial, so do the math, 1 million, you need 12 million jurors, you probably have to bring in 50 people for each of those, so 50 million. We would all be on juries all the time. That's the only thing we'd be doing, is being on juries all the time. Everybody's guaranteed a jury trial, but thank God they don't all go for a jury trial, because all we would be doing is being jury duty all the time. You get off one jury, and then you go get on another jury, then you go get on another jury. So there's this thing built into the system called plea bargaining. And what a plea bargain is, it says if you're accused of a crime, you have a right to work out a deal with the prosecutor, and you can plead guilty to a lesser crime. And it has sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly effect. The good is it saves us all these juries. There have been probably a lot of people that have been called into jury duty where they never needed a jury seated because the person pled guilty to a lesser offense. So the good part of plea bargaining is it saves us all from having to be on jury duty all the time. They're just pleading here and plead guilty to a lesser offense. The bad part of it is there are people who probably should serve serious penalties, but they plead guilty to lesser offenses to save the state the money and the headache and the hassle, and maybe they should be getting the maximum penalty. So you have someone who's accused of murder, for example, and may deserve 30 years in prison, plead guilty to manslaughter, and serve only 8. So that person probably, maybe even they might have deserved the death penalty. They got out of the death penalty because they pled guilty. So the bad part of it is that, sometimes justice is not served. The ugly part of this is that a lot of people, especially lower income people, especially minority people, are pushed into pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. So let's go back to Paco. Here's the deal. Paco has a DA. DA is a public defender. Public defender is a great public defender, really believes Paco is innocent, and said, okay, Paco, here's the deal. You are accused of this crime that is 7.5 years in prison. 7.5 years in prison for first degree assault. I think you're innocent, and we can go get a jury and sit the jury down, and we'll give them all the evidence. But I'm going to tell you right now, you got a felony conviction or 2 from when you're younger. You've got an eyewitness that puts you on the scene, and you don't have an alibi. I think that jury, especially here in Multnomah County, is more likely to be an all-white jury. They're going to say, yeah, this guy's guilty. He's guilty of sin. And they're going to put you away for 7 years and 6 months in prison, of hard time in prison, where it will be a nightmare. What I'm going to tell you something you're not going to like, but this is what I'm going to tell you, Paco. I think you should plead guilty. They're making a deal. I think you should plead guilty to second-degree assault. Second-degree assault is only 5 years and 10 months in prison. So basically, it's 2 years shorter in prison, and you'll be out sooner, and those are 2 years of your life that you can get back together. But man, I didn't commit this crime. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I believe you, Paco. But this is the deal. We can go to a jury trial, but I'm going to tell you that jury is going to find you guilty. So if you want 2 years of your life out of prison, plead guilty to this crime. What's Paco going to do? I mean, really, what's Paco going to do? It's the roll of the dice. And I'm going to tell you something that makes it even harder for people like Paco is the district attorney, the person who wants to put people in prison, and the public defender, the person defending these people who are accused of these crimes, and the judges all know each other. They spend all day long moving these cases through the court system. They're friends. They, go out for drinks together. They figure out how they're going to move these things quickly through. It's called the courtroom work group. And that public defender, while he or she may really believe in the innocence of Paco, it's got a whole bunch of cases just like Paco that they got to move through the line. And I've sat in on some of these decisions. I worked on a murder case involving a homeless family that brutally beat to death a disabled woman and set her body on fire. And there was a 16-year-old who was sort of dragged into this. And she had a DA, and the DA thought, man, we can, take this to a jury and find this kid innocent. But they went into a room. I was there for the hearing, and they went into a room together. The judge, the prosecuting district attorney, and the public defender went in a room together, and they came out and they said, hey, they've made you an offer, 5 years in prison if you plead guilty. And she pled guilty. So when we ask, would you plead guilty to a crime you wouldn't commit, you might say no. But if you've got a lot of economic resources and good attorneys, you might be okay there. If you don't, especially if you're a minority person, especially if you're a poor person, you're going to be pushed to plead to a crime you didn't commit. And then what happens? You go to prison. Prison's no easy place. Prison traumatizes people. We're looking now at PTSD for people who come out of prison, but not only do you come out brutalized and sometimes incorporated into violent gangs just out of a matter of survival. Once you're out, you have a felony conviction, so you're applying for a job. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? Well, Paco didn't commit it, but was convicted, so he's got to say, yes, sorry, you can't get a job. You want to get an apartment? It says, have you ever been convicted of a felony on the loan application or on the rental agreement? You got to say yes. Can't find a place to live, can't get a loan. There are all kinds of forms of discrimination, and your life is over, even though you were innocent. Even though you didn't commit the crime. And so this is the ugly part of the system that disadvantages poor and minority people that we really need to be clear about. So the question is, would you plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit? You might. You just might. Real briefly, I want to talk about a couple other things. I want to impress upon folks that sad reality. I was hinting a little bit at drug legalization, and I wanted to just very quickly kind of talk about the argument about drug legalization since we're in the middle of it here in Oregon. And part of it has been a recognition that the war on drugs just has not worked. The war on things usually don't work, including wars on viruses, for example. It's not a really good way to solve problems. A war on poverty didn't end poverty. War on drugs certainly didn't end drugs. And the war on the invisible enemy, as Trump calls it, is probably not the best way to go about this particular issue. War causes problems, but what can I say? I'm a pacifist. So the argument now is being made about drugs. Since we want to reduce the harm by drugs, why not use something other than a war? Why not do something other than just lock people up? Right? It just doesn't do anything. It has zero impact. And so the legalization debate, I'm going to just run through it very quickly, is all about harm reduction. How we reduce the harm associated with drugs by taking them out of that category. So remember, we have these four crimes: violent crimes, property crimes, victimless crimes, and white-collar crimes. And we put the quotation marks around victimless crimes. Let's move them out of the criminal category, like we've done with a lot of gambling, like they did with prostitution in Las Vegas, and now like we're doing with marijuana. Why not legalize all drugs? And the first time I heard this, I thought, this is crazy. There's no way this is a good thing. But the argument is a very rational one. And the first is you reduce a lot of crime. The first thing is you reduce a lot of crime. First of all, you're taking a crime category out. But just think about the black market associated with illegal drugs and the violence associated with it. I like to say, what if, you ready for this? Coffee was outlawed. What if they outlawed coffee? Coffee beans were bought. There are no more coffee allowed being sold. What would happen? Like, people need their coffee. I need my coffee. There would be an underground, a black market, a cartel of coffee bean traders, the black bean market, Coffee would go up in price because, when things are illegal, they become more expensive because there's lots of risk involved. And there would be people, fighting over coffee markets to be able to sell coffee on certain corners. People would turn to crime to keep their coffee habit going. And the FBI tells us that most property crimes are motivated by people who need drug money because drugs are expensive. You make drugs cheaper for sale at the drugstore, a lot of those property crimes go away. So you get rid of white collar crime. There's a lot of people embezzling from their place at work to take care of their cocaine habit. You get rid of street crimes around, gangs and things like that. I mean, you just sort of wipe out a lot of crime, including things like terrorism. I mean, the reason the Taliban has such a stranglehold on Afghanistan is not because of their ideology, it's because they control the poppy fields that feed the world supply of heroin. Let's legalize it. You also reduce the prison populations. Half of the people in prison are there on drug-related charges. We have to release people from prison, including sex offenders, to make room for the drug offenders who the laws say they have to be there. In Los Angeles, 75% of the people who are in jail are there on drug-related charges. Let's just purge all those people out. You reduce the court loads. We have a right to a speedy trial, but there are so many drug cases clogging the court systems of America. That doesn't work. You spend money on treatment and prevention instead of spending it on the militarization of the police and building more and more prisons. You spend that money telling kids about why they shouldn't use drugs and preventing drug use and treating people who have a medical problem. They don't have a criminal problem, they have a medical problem. So let's use a medical solution to the problem. And I know that poor people often have a hard time finding treatment from state-funded addiction programs because they are so horribly underfunded. So instead of spending all that money on tanks and prisons, spend it on treatment facilities and doctors and nurses. If you legalize it, you deglamorize it. Some people do drugs. This might be shocking to some of you. Some people do drugs because they're illegal. I mean, look at how kids learn to smoke, right? When kids smoke, they're like, I'm smoking, I'm smoking, I'm smoking, I'm a rebel. And then, after they're like 21, they're like, I'm smoking, sorry. They're like the cigarette's way down here, or the vape pen. Part of I call it the woo-woo effect. Part of it is that it's just sexy to do some crazy drugs because they're against the law. You turn it into a medical problem. You say, hey, how's your addiction going? Like, oh, that's not as cool as like being a rebel. You tax it. You tax the F out of it. Now have a surplus of cash from the tax just of marijuana. The marijuana sales are higher than corn sales in terms of the dollar amount. And corn is the biggest product in America. So pot is bigger than corn. So you just tax it just like we tax gasoline and tax tobacco. And gee, all of a sudden we've got money to do the things we want to do. I got a pothole in my street. Tax that pot, fix that pothole. Also my kid needs a decent school. You control the quality. Right, it becomes FDA approved. You're getting it at the drugstore with a doctor's prescription, and you know what you're buying because it's heavily regulated. Instead of buying something on the street and you don't know what it is, right? We have people who are dying because they're buying stuff on the street that's cut with fentanyl or God knows what, and they don't know what it is. They can't go after the person they sold it to because they're dead. So you control the quality. You also protect liberty, right? We've surrendered a lot of our liberty because of the war on drugs and search and seizure and things like that. And you also can help stabilize some of the governments around the world, like Mexico, that have been completely corrupted by America's drug habit. When you look at all the hell in places like Colombia and Mexico, it's because they are working to feed American drug habits. All that drug that's being, turning those countries upside down is being consumed by Americans. Legalize it, control it, produce it, have your pharmaceutical companies and your tobacco companies and your agricultural companies grow it. They get rich. You control the quality. Cartels disappear. I mean, this is the argument. Is the leading voice against drug legalization traditionally has been the mafia. That's the last thing they want. That's their thing. That's their thing. All of a sudden, Pfizer is selling cocaine tea, and the mafia and has to find a new gig. So, and there are versions of this, varying versions of this that have been tried around the world, and some of it has been quite successful, including places like Switzerland, where they give heroin addicts heroin, and the crime rates drop. Then you just go to the doctor. You're a heroin addict, and you get a prescription, and you go get a little bit of heroin. You can go to work. You can have a normal life, and you don't have to spend all your time searching for how you're going to fund the next fix and breaking into people's houses. And so they just give heroin addicts who've been identified by the doctors as addicts medication, which is heroin, and it just seems to save a lot of money. So the interesting thing about this argument is that there is a lot of support from this, both on liberal camps and in conservative camps. Conservatives recognize that it's cost effective, that people have a right to put whatever they want to in their bodies as consenting free adults, and if you have the right to own a gun, you have a right to own a bong. So it's one of the rare things where you see liberals and conservatives actually on roughly the same page about it. Okay, so that's that. And this last bit I want to do is I just want to highlight something that is in your textbook, which is a discussion of the theories of crime. And so remember back when we were talking about theories. Theories are, A has an impact, variable A has an impact on variable B. And if you want to change variable B, you just change variable A. And so we have theories. There's sort of three parts of theories. The first is imagining there's a relationship between variables. So I might say, I'm interested in juvenile delinquency, why kids are committing crime. And so the variable I think might be the independent variable is the amount of sugar that kids eat. Because kids eat a lot of sugar, and in this house it's certainly an issue. That kid just wants to gobble bags of sugar. Maybe sugar is the independent variable, and so there's a causal relationship. So the first thing is to imagine a relationship between variables. The second is to do some research. And there has been a ton of research done on kids and crime, and it turns out it's a spurious correlation. It's because kids aren't eating healthy food that's causing them to act out and be more impulsive and fail in school, and so it's not sugar. But if I do find some evidence based on my research, the third step is then policy. If I do find some evidence that sugar causes juvenile delinquency, then I can say, all right, let's do things to reduce sugar from kids' diet. Let's get them on healthy food, and let's remove some of the additives from the food, and we'll see the juvenile crime rate go down. So that's why criminologists are interested in crime, is that we want to have an impact on crime in general, or specific types of crime, like my work on hate crimes. And so we're interested in what the independent variable is. And the independent variable is correlated to the dependent variable. Then we can do some research and figure out if that's actually working or not. And so the theories that are presented in your book there's sort of a range of theories. And I'm going to let you go through them, but I am going to ask that you kind of take a moment to read them and identify them as the relationship between variables, how A is impacting B, and B is crime. What is A? What is the research that backs it up? And then what would be the policy? What would be the policy to reduce B by changing A? And so at the end of this video, I'll give you a quick sort of list of some of the crime theories that I want you to pay attention to, because you're likely to see them on the final exam. But it's late here in the attic, and I feel like you can do that on your own. And I will I'll leave it that to maybe to our discussion in Zoom. All right, that's it. It's midnight. It's around midnight here, so I'm gonna stop around midnight. Cool. All right, look for the scroll of the crime theories. Peace.